Since yesterday, Sri Lanka has witnessed widespread violence against the Muslim minority in the country's northwest. Much of this violence has been reported in 3 different districts in the northwest, and there have been reports of mobs attacking mosques, the homes of Muslims, and also business establishments run by members of the minority community. There has also been a report of at least one Muslim man being stabbed to death by a mob. Much of this violence has, pitted the majority Sinhala community against the Muslims. And this comes at a very bad time because Sri Lanka is still trying to come to grips with the devastating suicide bombings on Easter Sunday, which killed more than 250 people and were claimed by the Islamic State. In fact, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has appealed for calm, saying that these attacks yesterday are hampering the investigation into the bombings. Well, this is not the first instance of, the Muslim minority in Sri Lanka being targeted. There have been instances in the past few years of, rumors against the Muslim minority spreading on social media platforms such as WhatsApp and Facebook, and that led to violence in some parts of the country, but that was sporadic. But this time, the violence acquires a different dimension because it comes in the aftermath of the suicide bombings on Easter Sunday, which the Sri Lankan authorities have blamed on 2 radical Muslim groups, and which, as I said, have also been claimed by the Islamic State. So there is a feeling among experts and also people in the government in Sri Lanka that if this time this violence is not checked immediately, it could have wider ramifications for the country at a time when people are trying to focus on how to counter these radical groups that carried out the suicide bombings, trying to ensure that there is no more further radicalization of the Muslim minority. The Muslims account for about 10% of Sri Lanka's population of 22 million people. By and large, relations between the majority and other minorities such as Christians and the Muslims have been overall, since the end of the civil war in Sri Lanka, there have been good relations. So people are trying to ensure that this sort of violence doesn't spread and doesn't have wider ramifications for the security in Sri Lanka. Well, there have been some tensions in the past. Even during Sri Lanka's civil war, there were some problems between the Tamil Tigers who led the insurgency in Sri Lanka. They didn't have a very good relationship with the Muslim minority. But since the end of the civil war, things have been, by and large, they've been good. Muslims run several businesses in many parts of Sri Lanka. They are pretty much a part of the country. They are integrated into the country. But a sudden rise in Sinhala nationalism in recent years, and especially rumors and all sorts of misinformation that has been spread on social media and messaging platforms such as WhatsApp and Facebook have led to tensions between the Muslims and other communities. But this again, even yesterday's violence, a lot of it was triggered by misinformation that was spread on Facebook and WhatsApp, and the Sri Lankan government has clamped down on these platforms to ensure that there is no further spread of this violence. Well, the Muslim community in Sri Lanka, like the Muslim community in most South Asian countries, is by and large peaceful. There hasn't been a large number of people from the Muslim community going off to fight with groups such as the Islamic State. But there have been reports of Sri Lankan youths going and fighting in Syria and Iraq, and there has been worries for quite some time about what would happen when these people come back. Since the Easter Sunday bombings, we have heard reports that some of the people who were involved in those bombings could have returned from Syria. There are also reports that some of them had traveled to India and met with other radical elements in southern India. So, by and large, the Muslim community in Sri Lanka is peaceful, but there is clearly a need to address the tensions that exist between the Sinhala majority and the Muslim minority. This is, one of the root causes for what we've seen since yesterday. And clearly, the Sri Lankan government has to act swiftly to tackle rumors and misinformation, and to ensure that the focus remains on the investigation into the Easter Sunday bombings, so that acts like that don't happen again in Sri Lanka.